Hey guys, looks like I'm going to be able to get this started here. I think this will be a much better format than what I was doing before. Hopefully, we can get this working going forward. Today, we're going to start digging into Key Concept 8.4 from AP World, and this is going to be the spread of communism after the year 1900. So you'll recall that in the year 1900, communism doesn't have a home really anywhere on planet Earth. It was an intellectual construct of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels in the 19th century. But apart from that, it hadn't successfully spawned any actual communist governments. The first one that's actually going to develop is the Soviet Union, starting as early as 1917 through the 1920s, when the revolution finally successfully creates the USSR. One of the next examples, though, is going to be China. So the curriculum reads: as a result of internal tension and Japanese aggression, Chinese communists seized power. These changes in China eventually led to a communist revolution. So Japan had invaded Manchuria in the 1930s, had actually invaded the Yellow River in 1937, and then came all the chaos from World War II. China in 1945 didn't see the end of the fighting. It just continued on what had been a civil war between the communists and the Democrats, and that war eventually would be won by Mao Zedong and the Chinese Communist Party, and Mao would declare the People's Republic of China in 1949. He said, our aim is to build up the confidence of the whole Communist Party and the entire people in the certain triumph of the revolution. We must raise the political consciousness of the entire people so that they may willingly and gladly fight together with us for victory. We should fire the whole people with the conviction that China belongs not to the reactionaries, but to the Chinese people. We firmly believe that, led by the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese people will achieve complete victory. In communist China, they would engage in economics in a very similar way as the emergence of the Soviet Union. The government controlled the national economy, and the first of the attempts at trying to put in this like 5 year plan, similar to what the Soviets had done, is going to be this thing called the Great Leap Forward. The Great Leap Forward often implemented repressive policies, and again, similarly to the Soviet experience, is going to have negative repercussions for the population. Mao had a lot of ideas. Some of them didn't work out so well. So, like, for example, Mao thought it would be a great idea to try to rapidly industrialize the country by having the peasant population try to grow steel production by producing these backyard steel furnaces. You can see some of them right here. The steel furnaces largely were a disaster. The Great Leap Forward ended up resulting in the deaths of about 30 million people who died from starvation. Between 1958 and 1962, China descended into hell. Mao Zedong threw his country into a frenzy with the Great Leap Forward, an attempt to catch up with and overtake Britain in just a few years. Um, it's going to be totally devastating for the Chinese population. Estimates are something like 30 million people starved to death. The officials in China were encouraged to raise their reported amount of food that they were producing so that they could export food to try to make it look to the rest of the world like China was doing great when it actually wasn't. And mass starvation resulted. Westerners are oftentimes surprised to hear as a result that Mao is actually still even quite popular inside China today. If you go to Beijing today, you go to the Forbidden City, and you're going to see on the front of the Forbidden City a big portrait of Mao Zedong, and it just kind of blows the minds of Westerners because they don't understand how could this guy still be so popular inside China. Well, because a lot of stuff happened, and not only negative stuff happened in China, the same as like the first of the 5 year plans in the Soviet Union. It actually did raise production. So, in the time that Mao was leader over China, here's kind of some of the data of what went on. So, first of all, steel production went massively up. I mean, this is just undeniable, from 1.3 million to 23 million tons. Coal production went way up, 66 million to 448 million tons. Electric power generation went way up inside China, 7 million to 133 billion kilowatt hours. Fertilizer production inside China went way up, from zero point 0.2 million to 28 million tons. Cement production went way up, from 3 million to 49 million tons. The number of people working in industrial jobs went from 3 million to 50 million, a massive increase. China had a lot more people that went into science and technology, from 50,000 people to like 5 million people. Uh, Mao didn't think that people had to have like a good education to become a doctor. And so while he was leader of China, he had just regular women, about 1 million of them, posted to the countryside to just be these barefoot doctors. Uh, the annual growth rate of industrial output while Mao was leader was 11% annually. The annual growth rate of agricultural output was 2.3%. The total population in China while Mao Zedong was leader of the country went from a mind-blowing 542 million people to over a billion people. That's doubling the population of China while he was the leader. The average population growth was 2% per year. Per capita consumption of rural dwellers went from 62 to 124 yuan annually. Yuan is Chinese currency. Per capita consumption of urban dwellers went way, way, way up to 324 yuan annually. And this perhaps says it better than anything else. Overall life expectancy inside China while Mao Zedong was leader went from 35 to 65 years, a truly huge difference. But at the cost of this, between 1949 and 1952, between 1 and 3 million people were killed, being accused of being counter-revolutionaries. Uh, Mao was really worried about like this slow slide towards capitalism, and so a lot of people were labeled rightists inside China. In a very similar way that there was the Red Scare here in the United States, where kept guys like Joe McCarthy would accuse people of being communist sympathizers and the same sort of thing, right? So instead of people being labeled like communist sympathizers like they were here in the United States, they were labeled rightists or capitalist roaders or something like that inside China. 550,000 people. The deaths from famine during the Great Leap Forward, maybe something like 30 million to 45 million total people dead. A truly astonishing number of people killed from the famine, the greatest famine in human history. Deaths during the Cultural Revolution, the later part of Mao's time as leader, 500,000 people. Officials sent down to rural labor camps during the Cultural Revolution, 3 million people or more. And then a lot of the city youth, Mao thought that they could learn a lot by like going to the countryside and working on rice farms and that type of stuff. 17 million people from 1967 to 1976 during the Cultural Revolution. Of course, in history, anytime you're firing off numbers like this, it's highly controversial. Numbers in history are really, really, really hard. Like, stuff doesn't always get recorded. And, the number of people who died, like from the Great Leap Forward, when Chinese peasants died, they didn't always create records. And so, anyway, for more information on these figures, go see Mao's China and After, as well as the politics of China. Anyway, that being said, China gets us our first example here for the new movements towards communist states And I'll create a separate video for the next one coming up.